We also have some breaking news that we're following. A delegation from Ukraine will meet with White House envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Miami to discuss the U.S. peace proposal this weekend. That's according to a White House official. Now, the trip comes a day after the surprise resignation of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's second-in-command on Friday. CNN's Larry Madowo has more on these fast-moving developments.
President Zelensky moving on swiftly after the resignation of his chief of staff, one of his closest allies, Andriy Yermak, who's seen almost as a shadow prime minister because of this corruption scandal shaking his administration. Zelensky has now appointed Rustem Umerov to lead the negotiations to end the war. That he and his team already on their way to the United States to continue these talks. He is the secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, former defense minister, and has been involved in these talks already. And that announcement coming just hours after Russia launched the largest barrage of attacks, drones and missile attacks against Ukraine. 36 missile attacks, nearly 600 drones that targeted critical energy infrastructure and civilian facilities, terrorizing the population. Less than 2 victims.
This is intimidation by Russia. The attacks are targeting the civilian population in order for Kiev and the government to make a decision faster, to sign the agreement faster.
Peace. I don't believe there will be peace anytime soon. With such neighbours, I doubt there will be peace anytime soon. It's getting worse and worse. It's getting worse every day.
The overnight Russian attacks left over 600,000 people without power, mostly in Kiev and the surrounding region. President Zelensky once again appealing for international support to shore up Ukrainian air defense systems. At the same time, a source in the Ukrainian security services telling CNN that Ukraine was responsible for attacking 2 Russian so-called shadow fleet in the Black Sea. These are tankers that transport Russian fuel, selling them against sanctions, and they're usually flagged under different countries for convenience. These 2 were flagged under the Gambian flag, and there was some damage to them using underwater drones. This is just the latest front as Ukraine tries to assert itself as this war grinds on. Larry Madowo, CNN, Nairobi.
All right, Larry Madowo, thank you for that reporting. Let's continue the conversation now. With us now is Joel Rubin. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and author of the Briefing Book on Substack. Now, with Ukraine already appearing to be on board with a version of this proposal earlier in the week, I mean, what do you expect Witkoff and Kushner will actually, one, either focus on during this meeting, but accomplish with this meeting?
Yeah, Omar, it's great to be with you. And diplomacy for the United States is all about getting a deal done that both sides respect and that's sustainable and that our European allies are supportive of as well. And so my hope is that in these talks, we're going to see Ukraine believe and Zelensky believe that he has achieved goals and his goals and gains at the negotiating table that he can live with. My fear is that he's going to get strong-armed, that what we've seen over the past week or so has been a Russia-first diplomacy and a diplomatic initiative to push the argument that Russia wants, which is to take territory from the East and to have that, and pushing that into Ukraine as a piece that they must accept. And so I hope that that isn't what happens, and I hope that Ukraine does get at the table where they believe they can live with.
Well, you know, amid all of this, we've been talking about Zelensky's top advisor resigning as this corruption investigation deepens in the country. And I just wonder, do you think that works against President Zelensky, or is he able to spin this into, I guess, a victory by saying, hey, this shows the system inside Ukraine is working and won't tolerate corruption?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly bad news when your top lieutenant is essentially corrupt and needs to be tossed to the side. That is not a good sign. So there's really no good way to spin it except to say what you just described. But I do think there's enough of a bench in Ukraine to replace him. President Zelensky is the president. He is the decider ultimately. And there is a cleanup that clearly the Ukrainian people will benefit from. But certainly this is not a good look for the president. But Ukraine, we have to be very clear, is a democracy, and it does not suffer from the kind of autocratic corruption that Vladimir Putin has over his country in Russia.
You know, you were just talking about this fear that the Witkoff-Kushner meeting doesn't turn into, you know, sort of strong-arming Zelensky. And, you know, we heard this leaked audio recording this week of White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff advising his Russian counterpart on how to deal with President Trump. You know, look, President Trump has defended that, saying, hey, look, this is just diplomacy at work. This is just how you get to a negotiation. But we also heard Trump frame this peace proposal as a potential breakthrough. I just wonder what you make of that whole dynamic.
Yeah, you know, Omar, it makes sense to try to sell a diplomatic offer. The problem is that the target for sale is the wrong target. Steve Witkoff should not be advising Russia on how to convince Donald Trump to support their deal. He should be trying to convince Russia to support our deal and our arrangement. And so that's where the diplomacy, clearly, the president's right in all these negotiations back and forth. It's inverse. And that's what makes people nervous, is that it's a Russian-driven diplomatic process and ridden negotiation. That's where we get concerned. That's why I think you saw the heavy pushback from Europe, from Capitol Hill, from the Ukrainians as well. Hopefully they're straightening it out right now. But again, that gives one a lot of concern from a diplomatic perspective.
And overnight, Russia launched a wave of new missiles and drones across Ukraine, killing at least 3 people. Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv was under air raid alert for more than 10 hours. That's according to CNN reporters on scene there. Ukraine's foreign minister said the strikes hit civilian homes as well as the country's energy grid. And Poland said they had to scramble military jets and air defense systems in response to the attack as a, quote, preventative nature. Back with me now is CNN Global Affairs analyst Kim Dozier. Thank you for staying with us. These strikes, they're coming after Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Friday to shore up Hungary's energy supplies and also to discuss the efforts to end the war in Ukraine. What do you make of this timing?
Well, what we have is basically Putin shoring up his allies. There's also a move by Belarus to buy up some of the sanctioned properties so that it takes some of the sanctions pressure off of Moscow. And you have the White House signaling that it's no longer pushing Putin for an immediate ceasefire. Instead, it's pushing Ukraine to accept parts of a peace deal that are rather unacceptable, that even include things like not prosecuting Russian troops for war crimes. Now, it remains unknown if the Ukrainians will cop to this, will accept this, but Europeans are feeling powerless, and it seems like Putin is feeling empowered.
Right. Some of that pressure has definitely eased off of Putin, now focused on Ukraine. And Putin expects a U.S. delegation in Moscow next week. He says he's ready for, quote, serious peace talks. But then he also said this. Listen to this.
Once Ukrainian troops withdraw from the territories they occupy, then the fighting will end. If they don't withdraw, we will achieve this through military means.
So he's talking about Ukrainian territory, the Donetsk region. Isn't that a non-starter for Ukraine, for Zelensky?
I mean, it is, though if you look at Ukrainian opinion polls, Ukrainians are tired and they're willing to give up some land in order to have the fighting stop. But Zelensky and European officials say if you don't do it in a way that guarantees Ukraine's future security, that's an invitation to Russia to invade again. And it's also a green light to Russia to invade possibly other European territories that Putin has made comments about. Putin also undermined his own commitment to the peace process by saying in other comments in recent days that he doesn't really see how he can sign a deal with this illegitimate government, as he describes it, in Ukraine, because Ukraine can't hold presidential elections right now. They're under martial law that they passed during the full Russian invasion in 2022. The other thing is Zelensky is at a really weak point right now, very fragile politically. He's had this corruption case that just took down his chief of staff. That was top negotiator for the peace deal, and also the bad cop to Zelensky's good cop in ruling the country. So he's having to redo his whole presidential office under this scandal. So it seems like the White House has decided once again that He's in the losing proposition, Putin is ascendant, and they're pushing a deal that would favor Russia.